We're running a little behind, and as you know, when you came in, and I'm Judge Whitener, by the way, welcome to Pierce County Superior Court. But as you know, when you came in, there's some traffic revision things going on, so things have slowed up a bit. So some of the girls, it's taking them a little while to get here, as well as clear our security. So we may start just a little after 9. One of the few preliminary things I'd like to go over with you, each one of you should have a blue band, and I'll make sure I get mine as well. It's from the National Association of Women Judges. Those bands, everyone that you see having on a band is a safe person. In regards to using the restrooms, you'll have the opportunity to use my restroom and my jury room. This is a public building, so we want to make sure you're safe. So if you do need to use the restroom, notify one of the volunteers. They have volunteer on their name tags, and that way they can get you to the restroom. We have a full slate of activities for you today. And of course, in your folders on the left-hand side, you'll see the agenda. Make friends. You have a wide array of girls here from all different backgrounds, ethnicities, you name it. So, connect. There are judges that are going to be seated amongst you. They're not going to be sitting up on the bench or anything like that, so the person next to you could be a judge. One of my colleagues who you'll be hearing from has a hashtag that goes, hashtag what judges look like. And she'll probably chat with you about some other things. So judges look like you, and we're going to be here for you today. Also on the left-hand side of your folders, there are tickets. That's your lunch ticket. Make sure you hold on to those, because there will be probably a lot more folks on this side of the presentation, but we will be moving to a different room for the lunch session where you'll have an opportunity to connect with the judges, more networking. But most importantly, you'll get an opportunity to meet my colleagues on my bench here in Pierce County. Most of them have to work, of course, otherwise court just stops. But they will plan on coming down and chatting with you and connecting with you, along with all the other judges that came from around the state to connect with you. We have volunteers from Seattle U Law School, we have volunteers from UW, and we have volunteers from Gonzaga. So the law school students are here supporting you. We have community members as well, and we have numerous judges, and you'll hear all about them, and as well as hearing from our keynote speakers. So we'll try and start at 9, but we'll probably give the other students about 5 minutes beyond that. It's a tight program, so just be a little flexible. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And of course, I will come again just before we start to introduce our first judge, who will be the most senior judge here in our bench, and that would be Judge Kitty Ann Van Dornick, who will kick off the program for us. Good morning. Hello and welcome to the Color of Justice 2017. I'm Judge Whitener, and welcome again. We do have a number of girls that still have not cleared security, so they'll just have to filter in. But you're here, and we're going to start, even though we're starting a little late. I'd like to turn it over now to the senior judge on our bench, female judge on our bench, Judge Kitty Ann Van Dornick, to welcome you to Color of Justice 2017. Judge Van Dornick.
Thank you, and welcome everyone. We are honored and really excited that you're here, and we hope this is the first of many of these events. It's very exciting. I really want to thank Judge Whitener for all the hard work of putting this all together. There's a lot of details that are involved. I know there are lots of volunteers who helped as well. Just a little bit about Pierce County Superior Court. There are 22 judges here in Pierce County, and we also have 8 commissioners. Commissioners are judicial officers. They're not elected like judges, but they're hired by the judges to act as judicial officers. In Washington State, there are 192 Superior Court judges, and we have an association statewide, which is how some of us know each other. The purpose of today's program is to encourage students to consider the law and judgeships as career goals. And I think that's why you're all here. The law is a noble profession. It is dedicated at its heart to helping, to healing, to resolving. A profession steeped in a tradition of honor and decency and great human courage. We have the rule of law here in this country. We all have important rights and protections, not just from crime, but for day-to-day matters, to protect the agreements central to our lives, like marriage, employment, custody, and our home mortgages and rent. Judges are essential to an effective democratic government and society. Our legal system sets us apart from other countries. Our legal system protects the rights of political, religious, and ethnic minorities. It's one that values equality and fair treatment, one that balances society's needs and rules, the voice of reason and conscience when others have lost both. Judges make possible the peaceful, orderly, and rational resolution of disputes. Peaceful because disputes are not settled by violence, but by discussion and reason. Orderly because our legal system is well-defined, methodical, and known or knowable to all. It is public and accessible. It can be learned and understood. It is not arbitrary, but purposeful. And while outcomes may not be predictable, the process and systems themselves are stable, predictable, and consistent. Judges preserve and protect order in our courts and in our legal system. I wanted to give you a little bit of perspective on how to become a lawyer and then a judge. It takes hard work, passion, and perseverance. The skills that you need, and you can start now, is you need to be able to write, learn to write, learn to read, learn to listen, and learn to question. You also need to learn to empathize, to put yourself in the place of the other. Before you judge classmates for the way they've acted, put yourself in their place. Before you judge your teachers, put yourself in their place. View the world from the eyes of others. So, in order to become a judge, you need to graduate from high school, and then go to college for 4 years. Law school is in 3 years. And then usually, judges are in the practice of law for maybe 5, 7, 25 years before they become judges. It is hard work, and there's a big commitment to public service and helping people. Today, you're going to have an opportunity to hear from many different women judges from the Puget Sound area and from all different levels of the court. Now, it's my honor to introduce our first speaker. Judge Veronica Alicia Galvan is a King County Superior Court judge. She was raised in Eastern Washington, where her father picked fruit for a living. She became the first member of her family to graduate from college. She earned her degree from Western Washington University. She then went to the University of Washington Law School. As an attorney, prior to being appointed to the Superior Court bench, she's been an administrative law judge, an assistant city attorney for the city of Seattle, and a municipal judge for the city of Des Moines. Judge Galvan also has the distinction of implementing the only Spanish language court in the state of Washington, granting hundreds of people the opportunity to address the court directly in Spanish. She did that in Des Moines Municipal. She is innovative, very smart, and very committed to justice in the community. She's also a really big Seahawks fan. Let me welcome my colleague and friend, Judge Galvan.
Good morning, everyone. I can't. Can you hear me? Better. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Now that sounded like a good morning. I'm here today to speak to you about why we need you on this bench. Why we need you, I need you to be one of my colleagues. I want to tell you a little bit about myself. As Judge Van Doorning said, I came from Eastern Washington, but I also grew up part-time in New Mexico. I was born in Bremerton. My father did indeed pick fruit for a living. But it's something that very few people know, that I'm also the daughter of a man who was deported, who returned illegally, who was imprisoned for returning. While I was in law school, one of the first appearances I ever made before any magistrate was at an immigration hearing on behalf of my father. This is what has defined me. This is the perspective that I come from. And those perspectives are important. So the first reason that we need you on the bench is because of those perspectives. The idea of understanding the impacts that you have when you represent an institution such as the judicial branch of government, when you represent a system such as a system of justice. Because we are members of a community, a large community, and that community, the faces of that community, needs to be represented in those institutions that defend our principles, that resolve disputes, and that address the needs of our community at large. I want everybody to take a look to your right to these pictures. This is the history of Pierce County Court. This is the history, frankly, of Washington courts. This is the history of our country's courts. And you will see in many of these pictures how justice has been defined and who has defined it for generations. And you will see recently that it has been defined by others. That we have stepped into these spaces. But we have stepped into spaces that have been defined by people who didn't necessarily share our experiences in life or our perspectives of how we interact with these institutions. This is why we need you on the bench. Because if we have all of that together, we have a better product. You are going to be told, and I am sorry if you have not been told already, you will be told that you do not belong. That this space was not meant for you. That you did not belong here. I was told that myself in high school by my school counselor. I was told specifically that I should consider not going to a four-year college because girls like me had babies early. So I want you to think about that. Because if I had listened, I would not be here today. If I didn't have the support of my family who did believe in me, or of mentors, or of people in my community that saw something different, I wouldn't be here today. None of the people that you will hear speak before you today got here by themselves. You will not get to where you will be by yourself. And I want you to tell you right now that every judge who is here today took this day to be here for you. But it's not a commitment of one day. It's not a commitment of a few hours. We are here for you. If you want to see what a courtroom looks like, call, email, Facebook me, Google me. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter. And I want to share with you one of the hashtags that we have. One of them is called What Judges Look Like. Because remember when I told you that there's going to be people to tell you that you don't belong? I still get that. You don't look like a judge. To which I've always responded, tell me, what does a judge look like? And I assure you most of the time they think they look like the left side of these photos. That's not me. It will never be me. So I am learning to occupy this space as a woman. I am learning to occupy this space as a woman of color. I am redefining this space because I cannot occupy it in the way it has been defined in the past. So as you take pictures throughout the day, I want you to use the hashtag WALKIPY, because we are occupying this space as women and women of color. And I want you to be leaders of the walkipation, okay? So hashtag it on Instagram or wherever you're hashtagging it. The other reason that we need you to understand what the principles are that have made this country great. The principles of equality, the principles of freedom. And I want to acknowledge that we as the courts, while responsible for ensuring that these principles are applied fairly, haven't always done so. Our courts have been responsible in many ways for some extraordinary systemic injustices. We have allowed the imprisoning of individuals because of the color of their skin or their ethnicity. We did that in World War II when we interned several Japanese. We have defined people of color as not being part of this country. We did that through the Dred Scott decision. We created separate but equal. This system of justice has to take ownership of that. But I firmly believe that we are also the best tool to address these issues and inequities. Because this is who people are going to come to. And that's why it's important that you're there. That's why it's important that you understand where we have been, so that you can see where we need to be. It is you, your generation, who is going to lead us down that path. I look at my generation as a significant bridge. There were people who came before me who had helped and mentored me and ensured that I became a part of what we call this system of justice. I, in turn, don't pay that back to them. I pay it forward to others, because that is the expectation that they have set before me. And that is the challenge that I set before you. I set before you the challenge of becoming. There was a part of me when Judge Whitener, Helen as I call her, asked me to say, why does America need you on this bench? There was a part of me that just wanted to take a picture with my gavel, kind of like Uncle Sam, going, we want you. So as you do that, think about that. Because we do want you. We don't just want you, we need you. We need you to be a part of our institutions. We need your voice to be part of our system of justice. And not just the institution of the judiciary, although I hope that each of you aspire to become judges. We need you as police officers, we need you as detectives, we need you as investigators, we need you as bailiffs and clerks and court reporters, as interpreters. We need you. America's principles should never be conflated with its practice. Because while we've held these principles, and I hold these principles, and I swore an oath to uphold these principles, I have to acknowledge that the practice of these principles has not always been fair, has not always been equal. But we can change that. We can address it. And we can acknowledge where we have been. This isn't about blame, this is about progress. And that's where you come in. I want to remind each and every one of you that while you may be a product of our past, you are also the promise of our future. And it is in that future that I hope to welcome each of you as a colleague. So, thank you very much for taking one day out of your summer. I'm sure many of you probably had things to do, but I'm glad that you chose to spend it with us. I'm glad that you're taking these steps to explore your possibilities. And I remind you, again, as you look on social media, I know all of you are there, you can tag me, use hashtag ColorOfJustice2017 and hashtag what judges look like. Because I'm telling you right now, they look a lot like you. Thank you.
Judge Galvin doesn't get to give a speech and run. I was actually surprised that she stood behind the podium here because she's a mover. Does anyone have any questions for Judge Galvin? I saw a hand kind of go up inside there. Do we have a question? Let's get you.
Hi, so my question was, how do you think your personal perspective helped you become a better judge?
Well, I think having empathy is a big one, because I've seen firsthand the impacts that a court can have on the lives of the people. And sometimes even when I know that the decisions that I make are going to have impacts, I know that when I deal with very serious and very emotionally charged cases, whether it's in many instances sending a loved one to prison, letting the family know that I understand their pain, letting them know that I did not reach this decision lightly, letting them know that I have balanced both the needs of the individual and the needs of the community, and the reasons why we are undertaking the decision that we have made. I often found that just having people see me, and I want to make sure that people who are in front of me know that I see them, I hear them, that I am not just a rubber stamp on this is the way it works and this is the way it should be. And I think that that perspective has helped me make those decisions, and I hope it has helped the people, and I know it has because people have written me and said, thank you for taking the time to explain this. This helped our family find closure. It helped our family find healing. We know it was not an easy decision. So I think that perspective has really helped because I've been that family and I've seen the product of those decisions.
Are there any other questions? I see one here. And her one. No, you can sit if you want to.
When your counselor said that you shouldn't try to do a four-year college, did that like hurt you inside, or did that like try to build you up and say that I can do it?
Good question.
That's a great question. It was a little bit of both. I think when you go through all of these things, while independently may not seem like a big deal, they stack up like bricks, and you kind of just get tired of carrying that load. All those little slights, it's like they say death by 1,000 paper cuts. Those things that people say because of the color of your skin or because of your gender, because of your gender identity, because of these identity issues about your abilities are hurtful. They cut into your soul. But I was extraordinarily fortunate. I not only had people say those bad things, I also had people around me, and I surrounded myself with people who believed the good things and who saw those, who saw to my abilities, not to my color or to my gender. And there are people in this room who are there for that purpose. There are teachers that surround you. There are family and friends. But I want you to think about it from this perspective too. When you say that to or about each other as young girls and women, when we demean each other, we demean ourselves. And we then become part of this problem. You should all be there to lift each other up, to hold each other up, to celebrate the success of your peers, because when they succeed, you do too, because they reflect you. When your friends do something good, they are a reflection of you. So remember that. So for me, it did a little bit of both. I was a little too stubborn to accept the word of that counselor. I just said, okay, thank you, and moved on. But those things do pile up. And don't think that just because we sit here as judges that those things don't still happen. They do. You just have to make sure that you address them and that you find comfort in those that surround you.
Thank you, Judge Galman. But before I let you go, I came to you a little while back and I said I was struggling with my transition from being a litigator to a judge. And I said I was always an advocate, and now I felt like I was losing my voice. Remember what you told me?
I said you're still an advocate. People think that judges are neutral, but we uphold an oath. We uphold an oath to the law and to the Constitution. When you uphold an oath to something, by definition, you cannot be neutral because you are advocating for something. You are an advocate and you are the embodiment of that Constitution and of the law. Therefore, you do have a job, and it's a much larger job than advocating for one party or another. And so I told you that you are still an advocate and that justice is your client.
That's right.
Thank you, Judge Galvan. Now, the next person on your agenda, we are a little behind time, but you know what? Forget time. So, the next person who is on our agenda is the most recent female colleague of mine on the Pierce County Superior Court bench, and that is Judge Shelley Spear. And Judge Spear will then introduce the next speaker as well as herself. Judge Spear.
I'm told there's a microphone built into this podium, but can you all hear me? Okay, great, then I don't have to use that other thing. Again, my name is Judge Shelley Spear, and I just won my election and was sworn in January of this year, so I am one of the new baby judges, if you will, and so I'm fresh. I'm here to introduce Justice Mira to you, but since in a few minutes she's going to tell you her story and talk about her education and background, I'm not going to go there. I thought instead I would give you a personal story, and that way maybe you can think about heroes. Because if you truly are interested in being a lawyer or a judge or someone involved in our justice system, you're going to need heroes. Okay? And the heroes can be women in this room. And what I'm going to do is tell you the story of why I chose Justice Yu to be one of my heroes. She doesn't know I'm saying this, so I don't embarrass her. As I said, I just won my election. I was on the campaign trail starting in November 2015 all the way through November of 2016. That in itself was hard work. I actually met Justice Yu while I was campaigning. Early in the campaign, I thought to myself, I'm kind of new at this judge thing. I want to see an example of someone who's got experience and who's speaking to people in a campaign type of mode, because that's different than the way judges speak when they're on the bench. So I went to Seattle and I went to Justice Yu's kickoff event. It was a room full of about 1,000 people. It was huge. And there were things that impressed me right away about Justice Yu. The first thing I noticed is that she had a lot of courage and a lot of confidence, because she was able to stand up there on the stage and talk to 1,000 people without showing any signs of being nervous or worried or anything. She was just up there talking, and she was real. The second thing I noticed is that she was a woman of her word. She made promises when she gave her speech. She promised that if she were elected to her position on the Washington State Supreme Court, she would be fair. She would be well prepared. And she would be a hard worker. And to this day, I think she has kept and she's still keeping all of those promises. So if she says something, you can trust her. You can believe what she says. I think that's a very important quality for a judge or anybody in the legal profession. But the most important thing for me that I observed in Justice Yu is that when the event was all done, she didn't just sneak out the back, like we all kind of wish we could after speaking to 1,000 people. She actually went to the front doors where people were exiting, and she planted herself right by the doorway. And she shook the hand of every person that walked by. That's a lot of hands. And that's another thing that takes courage. But again, what impressed me the most out of all of this is that when a person came to her to shake her hand, she was genuine. She didn't feel like she needed to change herself or the way she was speaking or apologize or anything. She was just comfortable being herself in her own skin. And I was so impressed with that. I thought, you know what? If I'm going to be a judge and if I make it through this whole election, I'm going to try and model myself after Justice Yu, because I don't think I should have to apologize about myself. I don't think I should have to change for whoever is in front of me. So If you're out there looking for heroes, I think Justice You would be a really good one. There's other people in this room who would also be really good heroes. But I'm going to turn the time over to Justice You to tell you now her story of how she became a Washington Supreme Court Justice.
Thank you for that very, very kind introduction. I'm not going to stand at the podium, and I'm probably going to upset those who are filming or taking pictures, but I got to tell you, it's not about them, right? It's about you and me right now. In terms of the conversation that maybe we're going to have, because I'm going to tell you not only about myself, but I might ask you some questions as well, because I may never see you again. Today may be it, right? So this is a chance for us to get to maybe know one another, not in an intimate, personal way, but nonetheless, in a way that I hope opens the door so that we have a relationship. So first, let me ask you a question, because everybody keeps talking about justice or the Supreme Court. Anybody know what the Supreme Court is? Somebody tell me, what's the Supreme Court? Yes?
It's like the court in Washington.
That's one of them. That's the United States Supreme Court. That's right, there's one in Washington. We have one here. But can you tell me, what's the significance? What's the difference? What's the Supreme Court in the state of Washington? Somebody take a guess. Yes?
You guys handle more serious cases?
We handle very serious cases. We are called the Court of Last Resort in the state of Washington, right? The highest court, or the lowest court, I'm not quite sure, it depends on where you're sitting. But we make the final decisions on cases, right? So that if you have a case that's tried before Judge Anderson or Judge Galvan, and you're unhappy with that decision, you can appeal it, right? You can take it and say, wait a minute, they made a mistake. Take a look at this. That's called the Court of Appeals. And let's just say the Court of Appeals doesn't agree with you, and you say, I'm going to the last court in the state of Washington. I'm going to the
Supreme Court.
Right. That's where I sit. I sit in the state Supreme Court. Anybody know where that court is? Where's the court? Where's the state Supreme Court? Olympia, absolutely right. How many of you have been to Olympia? Good. How many have been to the state Supreme Court? Pretty good. Okay, so here's now the invitation. I invite you to come to the state Supreme Court, come to Olympia, email me and tell me you're coming, and I will give you a personal tour. I will let you sit in my chair on the bench so you feel what it's like to be a justice. I'll take you to my office. I will take you to the secret conference room where we make decisions. Most judges have never been in this conference room, but I'll take you there if you come to Olympia to visit me. Okay, that's a promise. I will take you and show you that. How many justices on the state Supreme Court? Anybody know? Not 5. How many? Not 22. 9. Great. There are 9 justices in our state Supreme Court. How many are women? Anybody know?
4.
Nope, not 4. Okay, here's a hint. There's a hand there. No, I want you to open up your folder. There's a bookmark in there.
Oh, 9.
Right? There is a bookmark in there. How many women are on that court? Somebody raise your hand. Tell me how many women. No.
6.
6. 6 women on our state Supreme Court. That is, right, what is that? That's supermajority. Now one picture is, this picture, let me hold it up. This is the Pierce County Superior Court. This is where you are right now, okay? These are the trial judges. The bookmark, you should have a little bookmark in there someplace. Or you only have that one. I've got others that have all 9 of the justices. We're going to get you one of those. 9 of the justices, it has our picture. Because when you look at that picture, I'm going to ask you another question for those of you who have that bookmark. Some of you do, some of you don't. Here comes Rhonda. All right? Because the next question is, how many women of color are up at the state Supreme Court? I heard a number. 1. 1. And who's that 1? You. Right. See how it gets easier? That does get easier, right? So Rhonda will distribute these. We'll get these to you. They're pictures and the bookmarks. Some of you have one, some of you have some, but there's a picture of the state Supreme Court and each of the individuals. So I started with asking you questions because it didn't make sense for me to talk about how I got there if you didn't have the bigger picture. So let me also tell you, because this is important for you to know, is that yes, I was the first woman of color on our state Supreme Court. But not the last now, right? Right. Because I'm here today. Why I said yes to Judge Whitener is because I'm looking for my replacement. Right? I need to find somebody to replace me, and I know this is the pool of people from where I might be able to recruit somebody to replace me when I decide to retire, when I get old. I'm almost old, but I'm not there yet. Right? But the whole point is to say, you never have to be the first, that there's opportunity for you everywhere. But I want to tell you how I got to the Supreme Court, because I don't want you to think that you can't be there, or that you have to be a certain type of person in order to be there. So, I grew up in Chicago. I'm multiracial. My father's Chinese. My mother's Mexican. They didn't have an education. They came from their respective countries. My father from China, my mother from Mexico. They met in Chicago. We would, some people would call, close to poor. That's a funny word, that word poor. But nevertheless, we didn't have as much resources as a lot of other people. We had our family intact, my brother and I. We lived in a teeny little house. My father worked in a factory all of his life. I never had a dream about anything when I was growing up. I just didn't. I went to school, and the only thing that I can remember when I was in elementary school is that I remember being afraid. I was afraid that somebody was going to call on me to answer something that I didn't know the answer to. So I spent a lot of time trying to be invisible. I didn't want anybody to see me. And the only problem is that I threw up every single day at school, right? So you become pretty visible when you're throwing up. And the reason why is because I went to a Catholic school, and we had to drink milk every day. But I was lactose sensitive. Right? Anybody lactose sensitive in this room? Yeah, probably quite a few. Right? It hurts. But I had to drink milk every day, and every day drink milk, and every day throw up. So, you can imagine, I wasn't necessarily the most popular kid, right? And I just wanted to be invisible. I was shy. The thought of getting up and speaking to somebody was my greatest nightmare growing up. And because my family had worked really, really hard in factories as a farm worker, my mother said to me, I only want you to grow up and work in an office. It doesn't matter where, but maybe you could be a secretary so that your hands won't be dirty like ours, so that your hands will be smooth, not like ours. And that's all they ever said. My mother said you could learn typing and you would be a great secretary. I didn't think about college because we didn't have the money. I never even had my own bedroom until I went to college. My bedroom was the living room. because we had a teeny little house and there wasn't just enough room. So I slept in the living room. And I didn't think anything of it, right? Until later, when you bring your friends over in high school, then it becomes, you know, then you feel like, wow, I don't have what they have. I don't have privacy. I didn't have things that I could call my own, which didn't make me want to go out and be a lawyer, a doctor, a judge. I just never even thought about it. I was a good kid, pretty much. I wasn't the best student. I just went along in school and get to high school, and this one teacher says to me, Mary, what are you going to do with your life? I don't know. I'm going to be a secretary. And she said, did you ever think about going to college? And I said, no, because we don't have the money to go to college. And my parents were very old-fashioned, and they said in those days, girls don't go to college, because you're just going to have a family, so why would you go to college? Well, of course, I didn't have an answer of why would I go to college, but this teacher said, let me come and talk to your parents. And she came to my house, and she talked to my parents, and she said, I will help Mary fill out those applications. I will help Mary find money to go to school. But you have to let her go to college, because she'll never have a chance to succeed if you don't give her a chance for education. And she kept coming to my parents and kept talking about it, helped me fill out applications. Finally, I get to go to college, and it was her alma mater. Anybody know what alma mater is? Right, it's the school that she went to, because she knew how important it was for me to have an opportunity to get out of my neighborhood in Chicago, to have an opportunity to be educated, to have an opportunity to do something with my life. She knew that this would be the first chance. I had no idea how I got in. I actually believe today that it's because she pulled some strings, because she knew people. I don't know. And it was only 30 miles from my house, but I can tell you that it felt like I was 6 states away from my house. You got a question? Yes. Oh, thank you for asking that, because I didn't say the name, did I? It's today called Dominican University. In those days, it was a small little place called Rosary College. But now it's Dominican University, 30 miles west of Chicago. So I went to that school, and the big question that everybody asked of me, what are you? Anybody ask that question? Do people ask me that? Anybody who's biracial here? What are you? Right? What a funny question. Nobody had asked me that before until I get there, because I'm there with all these other people who don't look like me, who I am somebody they have never seen before. And that question was, what are you? And I had to wrestle with that. And it hurt my feelings initially, because people were making me feel like I was something other than human. Right? It's not like, well, what's your background? Or what's your race? Or what's your ethnicity? But what are you? I don't know, human. And I have a little bit of an attitude, I will tell you. And I am not good. I did have an attitude. You cannot grow up, right? You can't grow up on the south side of Chicago without a little bit of an attitude. So I did have it. Eventually, as an adult, I learned how to answer that. In those days, I didn't. I didn't have a major. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know here I was in this place, that I could get an education. So I decided that I was going to study religion. And I said, I'm going to be a religion teacher. Now that makes no sense to a lot of people. And yet, I went to Catholic schools. In that Catholic high school, what I had were role models. And these were people who were religious. And so the only thing that I could think was, I want to be like them. I want to be good. I want to help kids like me. I want to do what this teacher did for me. So that's what I want to do. I want to be like them. And that's what I did. I studied religion. And then after I graduated from college, I was like, okay, now what do I do? Because I still didn't know. And I was afraid to teach. So I went down to an office of the church, the Catholic church. I thought, I'm going to apply for a job. And they were opening up a new office. This office was going to be called the Peace and Justice Office. It's like, wow, peace and justice, that sounds important. I'm going to go there and I'm going to apply for a job. And at that time, the Peace and Justice Office was looking at doing social analysis, social justice work. Not handing food out to people, but asking, why are people hungry? Why don't people have jobs? Why is there discrimination and racism? Right? They were different questions. And I said, I like that. So I went and applied. I talked to the priest, and he said, great, Mary, I need a secretary. And I thought, that's me, right? That's me, because that's what my mother said. I could be a secretary. And I said, Father Kate, I want that job. I want to be your secretary. I want to work in an office. I want to have clean hands. So I took the job as a secretary. And this priest, we sat there, and we didn't know what to do, because in those days, we didn't know how to do social justice, right? We just didn't know. So we went out and we listened and met people in communities. We went to tough neighborhoods. We went to the food lines, and we asked people, what should we do to advance social justice? What should we do in terms of equal housing, fair housing? Hard questions. And then we did that for 6 months and put a plan of action together. And Father Kane said to me, you know what, Mary? I don't think I need a secretary. I think I need a staff person, and I think you're it. And I'm going to give you a pay raise, and I'm going to have you come out with me, and we're going to go out and talk to people. And we're going to do community organizing. And we're going to fund community organizers. And we're going to make the world better for everyone. Oh, that's great. But of course, inside, I'm still the kid who's vomiting. I'm still afraid to talk really out loud. And I'm thinking, I don't know how to give a speech. And you know what Father King did? He said, I'm going to teach you. I'm going to do this. And he sat down with me and he showed me how he made his outlines. He gave his talk. And then he said, next week, you're doing it. You do what I do and watch. And I did. And I followed him. And he would give a talk, and the next week I would give a talk. And then he'd give a talk, and the next week I would do it. And suddenly I was standing up doing what I'm doing right now. Talking with people, sharing a vision, inviting people to do the work of justice. And during that time period, I got to meet somebody who we funded, who was a community organizer on the south side of Chicago. That's right, somebody knows who it is, right? He was there at the same time. African-American man, Barack Obama. That's when I first met Barack Obama in Chicago. What was he doing? He was doing exactly what I was doing. Organizing for social justice. Talking about social change. 5 years later, I was made the director of that office because Father Kane was promoted. And the bishop came to me and said, I'd like to make you the first woman director of this office. Wow. As soon as we did, what happens? Barack Obama says, I'm going to law school. I'm going to Harvard. And so many of us thought, why would you leave? You're doing the most important work in Chicago and you're going off to law school? It didn't make sense to many of us because he was the only African-American male doing community organizing in Chicago. And he went off to Harvard. And then we all know what happened, right? He had a bigger vision for himself. He had a vision about being great. He had a vision about making a difference. So I have to say, after 10 years of doing that work, I decided I want to be a lawyer too. That's not something I ever thought about. Never in my brightest of dreams did I ever think I should go off to law school. I thought, I'm going to do this. And you want to know why? Because after 10 years of talking with people about changing their hearts on racism, I had had enough. Because there were people in Chicago in those days who were good Christians, my colleagues, my friends, my fellow parishioners, who would not sell their homes to a black family. Good people, right? Doing the wrong thing. No matter how much I tried to persuade them that it was sinful, that it was wrong in the sight of God to do this, it didn't matter to them. And I thought, okay, the law is going to be the next set of tools that I'm going to use to bring about justice. Because at the end of the day, what the law says is, you know what? We love you, but we don't care what's in your heart. We care with how you behave. And to not sell your home to somebody because of their race is against the law. And you can have whatever you want in your heart, but we're going to prosecute you when you discriminate against somebody. That's what the law says. That's what the law does. The law does not see race as a barrier. Right? The law was the tool that would make things right, that would make things just, that would give each one of us what we are entitled to, which is equality, fairness, justice. And that's why I went to law school. I go to law school, and I learn how to be a trial lawyer. And I thought, oh, this is even better. Getting up in a courtroom and trying to convince 12 people of something was even better than anything I could think of. So I got a job in the King County Prosecutor's Office, because that puts you into the courtroom. And all my friends said to me, what are you doing working for the prosecutor's office? What happened to the work of social justice? There you are prosecuting people, putting people in jail. What are you doing? And yet I had to say, you know what I'm doing? I'm not trying to rack up convictions. I'm trying to do justice. I'm trying to hold people accountable, because the community needs to be safe. Well, that didn't go on for too long. I started to get involved in community organizations in Seattle. I started to volunteer in different groups. I was promoted in the prosecutor's office and made deputy chief of staff, which gave me a lot of power in that office to make policy decisions about how we were prosecuting, or what we would support in terms of a domestic violence unit, or drug court, or so many other ways, right, to hold people accountable, but still to do justice, to be compassionate, to be fair. After doing that for 7 years, which wasn't a very long time, there was a judge who came to me who said, Mary, I'm retiring, and I would like you to replace me as a judge. And my first response was, I'm a little kid who's still throwing up. I'm not ready for that. No. And yet she said to me, Mary, you don't get to decide when. Sometimes the stars are aligned. Sometimes you got to have the courage and the guts to walk through the door even though you don't think you're ready. I think you are, and I think you should apply for the job. So I go apply for the job. I interview with a whole bunch of people, and then I'm sitting across from Governor Locke, who I happen to know because he was a former client. And Governor Locke says to me, Mary, I need to know that if I were to ask you to take this seat and be a judge, that your answer is going to be yes. This is like a marriage proposal, right? You don't ask somebody to marry you unless you know they're going to say yes. Right? And I'm like, I got to answer you before you ask me the question. Because he wanted to be sure, right, that this is what I wanted. And I sat there, and I swear my whole life came in front of me in 3 minutes, and I saw myself as somebody afraid to do this, because the job is so important, and the job is a big job, and I didn't feel ready to do this. And Governor Locke said to me, Mary, I'm sitting here with the power to make this happen, and you're sitting in that chair right now, and this opportunity may never come again in your life. So think long and hard before you say no. And he was expecting an answer, right? This is like a big decision. And I said, okay, if you appoint me, I would accept. Next day is the public announcement that I was being appointed to the Superior Court. I sat as a Superior Court judge for 14 years, and I was really, really happy. I loved the job. I had great people like Rhonda Salveson back there in the green working with me. She was my court reporter. I had great people. I loved it. 14 years on the bench as a judge, and I was happy as could be. My parents already had died, so they never saw this, right? But I was saying to them, Mom and Dad, you'd be proud. You'd be proud that you could come from wherever you came from, and we had nothing, and I'm sitting here, and I'm a judge today. All of a sudden, I get a call from a friend of mine, Justice Gonzalez, who's on the Supreme Court. And he said, hey, guess what? There's a justice who's sick. He said, and he's going to step down, and you should apply for this position. And I said, oh, thanks, Steve. Sweet. I'm not running a statewide campaign. There's never been a woman of color elected in the state before, and I'm not going to be the first. right? Because I'm not doing that. This is a big stage. There's a lot of places I've never been to, and I'm afraid that I will lose. So I'm not going to do that. And Justice Gonzalez, being the good friend that he is, said to me, is that what you tell young people? Is that what you tell all your mentees all the time? You're afraid, so don't do it? You're afraid you're going to lose and fail, so don't do it? And I said, well, no, but this is different. I'm statewide, right? It's different. I'm going to places that they might shoot me for all I know. I don't know. But I didn't know. I was afraid. And he said, is that what you're going to say? And is that what you do say? And I said, no. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to apply because I think that the pool of people should be diverse. And that's why I'm going to do this. But I'm not going to really run, but I'm going to apply just so that it's a diverse pool of applicants, right? So I put my name in. I'm interviewed by, I felt like 200 people in terms of the bar associations. Everybody wants to interview you to say whether or not they think you're good enough for the job. So all of a sudden, I'm sitting in the governor's office. Governor Inslee, what does he do? Poses the same question of Governor Lott. I think they learned it at governor's school, right? Ask them what they're going to say before they ask. And he says, Judge you, what are you going to say to those people who don't know you, who don't look like you, who don't have the same experience as you? What are you going to say to them? And I looked at him and I said, I'm going to say the same thing to them I've said all my life to everybody. I'm not treating anybody different. I'm going to say the same thing, whether it's the farm worker in Yakima, whether it's a rancher in Spokane, whether it's somebody in the city of Seattle, it's going to be the same thing. This is who I am. This is what I stood for. These are the values that I care about. It's going to be the same. And then he said, if I were to ask you to serve, would you say yes? I'm thinking, I'm sitting here with the same question again. They want an answer before they're going to ask me. And I thought, I'm scared because I have to give up my job to do this. So if I lose this job, what happens? It means I don't have any job. So it was really scary to me. And yet at the same time, I have to tell you, I thought about every mentee, every fellow judge, every woman that I have supported. What would they say to me if they were sitting next to me? They would say, do it. You gotta do it. You gotta do it. And so I said, Governor, if you would appoint me to this position, I can tell you, I would say yes. And before I knew it, 2 days later, I was there being appointed to the state Supreme Court. I had to run an election, a contested election. And I had to go everywhere in the state. And I just have to tell you that it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because I got to go and talk with people everywhere in the state. Places where I was the first person of color that they're looking at as a judge. And people were kind. And people were welcoming. And people asked questions about the court. And people in little towns in the southwest part of the state, where I would never probably go again unless I were running, said to me, will you remember me when you're on the court, when you make decisions? Will you remember me like you remember all the kids you've met in Seattle? Will you remember me? Well, I said I will. Because if I'm elected, I work for everybody in the state of Washington. I work for everybody in the state of Washington. So I'm going to stop and say one more thing about the things that I have learned on my journey to the Supreme Court. And that is that everybody can be on the Supreme Court if you want to be. Because the qualifications are hard work and grit. Anybody know what grit is? Who can tell me what grit is? What's grit?
Working hard.
Working hard. Sticking to it, right? You're like sticky tape. You don't let go. Right? That's what grit is. That's what it takes. It doesn't take anything more. And each one of you could be my replacement if you want to be. There's one final thing that you might want to think about, and there's this book that I've read that I go back to all the time. It was written by David Brooks. Not everybody likes him, and that's understandable. He's on television, does a lot of commentating. He's in the newspaper a lot as well. He writes for the New York Times. But he wrote a book recently called The Road to Character. And this is a book that really has made me rethink a lot of things. And what I say to a lot of people at your age group and in college. And he talks about building character. And he said, you know, a lot of people spend their life building their resume. They want that resume to look really good. They take jobs because they can put it on their resume. They volunteer because they can put it on their resume. Right? But he says, you know what real character is? Is what is it that somebody would say at your funeral? What are they going to say about you when you are dead and they're talking about you and giving a eulogy? Are they going to talk about your resume, or are they going to talk about the type of person that you were? Well, they say she was kind, she was compassionate, she was a great neighbor, she was loving to other people, she was loving to animals, she was really generous with the resources that she had, she was a good person. And what he says is we ought to start our lives right where you're at, with building those kind of characteristics. Because it takes time to do that. We're not born that way, right? You got to learn all these things. And so my last pitch to you, learn to be kind, to be intelligent, to be able to look into a room and have social intelligence, that you could scan the room and see who's there, see their eyes, see the beauty of who they are, what they offer. Develop the skills that will make you, right, somebody worthy of somebody saying good things and kind things. That's what it takes. And I'm convinced that each one of you has the capacity not only to be on our state Supreme Court, but to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. We have our first Latina up there. Anybody know what her name is? Justice at the U.S. Supreme Court. No, over here. Sotomayor. Have we ever had an African American female up there? No. No, we have not. So one of you could be the first. And I'm inviting you to think about that. So I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to open this up for some questions if you want to ask me questions. And then I'm going to have to leave you only because I got to go talk to some law students at Seattle University Law School. So thank you very much for your attention, your time, and for being here. Yes, we got a quick question.
How many trials do you do in a day?
How many trials?
Yes.
Well, you know, at the Supreme Court, we don't do trials. We look at the trials that the other judges do. So in a day, we would look at 6. So we would have 3 arguments maybe in the morning, 3 arguments in the afternoon. We make our decisions based on a written record of what happened below. So we don't take testimony anymore. We look at it and say, was there any error in this case? So about 6 when we are in oral argument. You can watch us on TV, by the way, because all of the oral arguments are on television. Yes?
Why do people have trials?
Why do people have trials? Okay, so let me give you an example. Let's just say that as I'm getting ready to leave this room, one of those security officers grabbed me by the arm and says, put that phone down. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm Justice Yu. What are you talking about? You are. Put the phone down because you took that phone from somebody else. It doesn't belong to you. And I say, I don't have a phone that belongs to somebody else. And they say, you know what? So sad, too bad. Put cuffs on me. Take me over to the jail. I'm sitting there thinking, right? I call my lawyer. I say, I don't know what they're talking about. I don't have that phone. I didn't take anybody's phone. I'm here to give a talk. I'm a good person. I'm supposed to be somebody important. and I'm sitting in this jail being accused of taking somebody's phone. Prosecutor says, so sad, too bad, we think you did do it. We're going to show you the evidence at trial. It's like, I'm going to trial? And my lawyer says to me, we're going to trial. You know why we're going to trial? Because this is not true, and because we're going to get 12 people to listen to the evidence of the prosecutor, and that jury's going to find you innocent because they're going to believe you. A trial is the chance for the prosecutor to show the evidence and ask 12 people to convict me. I, as an accused at trial, get to put on evidence if I want to say I'm innocent, right? Nobody gets to lock anybody up in this country without the opportunity to have a trial, to see what the evidence is, to examine it, to cross-examine it, to show, right? To show what it is that the evidence is or not. That's what a trial is. It's the chance to get into a forum and for me to proclaim whatever I want to proclaim as the state or the defense. It's a chance for somebody to find facts. Is this true or not? That's what a trial is. But, let me say one more final thing, is I've heard these judges invite you to come to their courtroom. So I would say somebody should call Judge Gallant, somebody should call Judge Whitener and say, can I come in your courtroom and watch trials with you? Because watching it is the best way to learn what it is. And all the judges that you're going to hear from today will let you do that. That was a long answer. Yes. I think I saw a hand.
So the 12 people that close the room and decide stuff, like the third decision, is that what's the final decision?
Yep. No, and let's just say in that same case, right? They come back and they say, guilty. Let's just say they say, I'm guilty. They believe the prosecutor that I took somebody's phone. So what do I get to do? I get to go to the Court of Appeals. I get to go to another court and say, hey, you know what? They're wrong. And I need you to look at the record, review it, and you can see there was no evidence. There was no phone, no nothing, and I think that there was a mistake. That Court of Appeals will look at the decision, and maybe the Court of Appeals says, we agree with the trial court. We agree with the jury. You're guilty. I then get to go to the Supreme Court. And I get to say to the Supreme Court, which is the final court, you're it. You're my last chance. There was no evidence. And hopefully the Supreme Court's going to say, you're right. But that's how it works. It's the final decision in terms of facts, but then I get to ask other courts to take a look to see if there was some error below that needs to be corrected. And that's how it works. Make sense?
Question over here.
Okay.
You don't want to.
When do you believe you'll be done or satisfied with what you've done?
Gosh, that's a great question.
Can you say it again? Because we didn't hear you.
When will you be done or satisfied with what you've done?
I hope that I'm never satisfied to the extent that I can say, oh, time for me to go because everything is great and the world's at peace. I don't think I'll ever be satisfied because there's so much work to do in terms of justice. I have to retire by a certain age. The law says I got to retire at 75. So no matter what, I'm done at 75. If beforehand I decide that I want to do something different, I can always step down. I haven't decided that yet. I have 6 years to my term, so 6 years from now I need to make a decision. Do I run again, or do I step down and maybe give somebody else a chance to be there? I will always be involved in the work of justice, whether I'm a judge or not. Always, always, always. And then I just have to say this is my little pitch. Today's climate makes me say that I'm going to be involved in the work of justice until I die. So pretty soon I think we got to close this chapter up. I can take one more question if there is one. Let's take two. We'll take the one hand back there and then here.
What does happen if a judge gets, if they do something wrong?
If a judge does something wrong, we can be removed. Somebody could take us right out of office in the sense that they could file a complaint. Let's just say I was swearing from the bench or saying something terrible. You know, people can file a complaint, and I could be removed from office. Yep.
If you are a judge, can you go to jail?
Yeah. You know, I can tell you, really, there's a lot of stories of judges being just like everybody else. Is sometimes judges make mistakes because we're human, and judges sometimes have what we call a lapse of judgment. And a real common mistake that just tubes somebody's career, right, unfortunately, is drinking and driving. People think they go to a social event, things happen, people make mistakes. And so judges can do bad things, judges can make mistakes. And the most important thing for you to know today is that we might be role models for you, but we're human, right? We're human. We're just like you. Maybe grown up, maybe old, but we are exactly like you. Exactly. All right, so I've got to get up to Seattle University. We have to give you a break because you need one. And then I want to go back there, and I'm happy to take a few pictures with people if you want. I have an active Facebook page. You might have one, so we can take some photos. And then Judge Galvana, both of us are going to get in my car and zoom up there and talk to law students. So thank you again.
What I'd like to do is have Judge Galvan and Justice Yu, Judge Shelley Spear, Judge Serco, if we can have you stand here and maybe get a picture of all of you with these beautiful faces behind you would be just wonderful. So come on up at least. Girls, stay seated because I want the judges to